Hey, welcome back. Lecture 24 already. Oh my goodness, we are nearing completion. How crazy is that? Seems like the time's just flying by. Regardless, this is our lecture on XML. As you could probably tell, I'm not a huge advocate of some of these less frequently encountered Oracle constructs. I think sometimes that they come out of academia a little overblown, get pushed through ANSI, and then Oracle kinds of forced to implement them because they're part of the ANSI standard. What's the chase? Not very much use on a day-to-day basis. XML is very different in that regard. Couple of rules of engagement for me with respect to XML. First off, XML files should never be used in lieu of a complete RDBMS. There's no referential integrity. Anyway, don't do it. That being said, there are plenty of applications where XML augments the use of an RDBMS very well. In particular, situation number one is where you've got some data that can exist in a stale state, that is not updated on a real-time basis, and that's still okay. Classic example is pricing for a sales team, for example. Maybe pricing only gets updated once a month or once a quarter, something like that. There's no reason to have that sales team banging on your RDBMS when they could just as well be banging against an XML file because nothing's really changing in there, at least with respect to the read side of that activity. The second application I find incredibly valuable for XML is database synchronization, where you've got a distributed database situation. Distributed database situations are tough. Let's say you've got 10 partitions to this database and they exist on 5 different continents. Getting these things to stay in sync, even moderately stay in sync, is really tough. Two-phase commit simply doesn't work. We'll talk about it in our next lecture on performance, but it's again an academic idea, but it doesn't float. Master-child is what we had to live with for many, many years, but now we can synchronize those master-child database, distributed database situations via XML files, and that is a really cool solution. So that being said, as you can tell, I'm pretty excited for this particular lecture. But also, I want to give you a little advertisement here because we're only going to spend 15, 20 minutes on XML. Whereas later this year, middle of 2017, I will be coming out with a full course on Oracle XML, and I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be very exciting, so I would hope that you can check that out. All right. All that being said, let's jump on the inside and start looking at some code.
Okay, guess where we're going to start? That's right, at the beginning. And with XML, that means the XML element function. Check this guy out. The function takes 2 parameters. The first is simply the tag name, and the second is the data to be stored with that tag. Let's run this guy in Developer and see what we get. Really, guys? Maybe there's a reason this software's free. Okay, this might be a good time to tell you about Toad. If you'll recall, when we studied ER diagrams, I told you about Irwin and how if you really wanted to be a professional in this space, you probably needed to cough up the money and buy a copy of that tool. Well, it's sort of the same thing here. Developer is fine for most things, but it simply bails out when you get to these user-defined types, one of which is the XML type. SQL Plus is a command line tool. Not going to get it done in the long run. Toad's a GUI tool with a very powerful user needs. Bad news, again, you need to get your wallet out. That being said, let's at least take a look at this query in SQL Plus because I know most of you won't have Toad. All right, that's more like it. A nice list of XML elements with a tag name of customer name and then the corresponding database values. Sorry, but that is also just too weird with the row size issues. From here on out, I'm going to run these queries in Toad so you guys can actually see what's going on. If you have to follow along in SQL Plus, I suggest you run a set long on a 200, 500, 1000, something like that command to increase the output buffer width. Okay, I see a bunch of repeating rows like that in a results set. My immediate inclination is to throw a distinct on that guy. Let's give it a try. Ooh. Not sure exactly what this error means at this time, but I bet we'll learn more about mappings in the order by clause going down the line. All right, I think now I want to try nesting these XML element functions and see if that doesn't start getting me something looking a little more like XML. All right, in SQL Plus, we are clearly getting something which looks more like XML now. No formatting here, of course, but any piece of code could certainly read that stuff. But just for the sake of readability, I'll clean that output up a little here, and sure enough, that's starting to look like XML to me. All right, now we're going to take a look at the XML attributes function. I'm sure you can guess what this guy's going to do. Yeah, of course, it's going to add attributes. Here's the syntax. Real straightforward. We're going to add some attributes to our opening Shine Drinker tag. The first one will be labeled ID and will contain customer ID value, and the second will be labeled Preferred and will contain a preferred customer field value. Did you notice no table alias on the customer ID field? Weird, hey? Check out what happens if I do put an alias on this customer ID field up here once we've referenced it in the XML attributes clause. I think I forgot to mention that little quirk in our query. Never really understood why that's the case, but that's the rule. Chase, you can't use a table alias associated with a field used in a using join clause. All right. Again, if you're running this guy in SQL Plus, you'll probably need to do a set long command to increase the output buffer. Me, I'm going to just run it in Toad so we can actually read the results. A little hard for reading from us humans, but let's go ahead and reformat the guy so we can take a look at it better. Oh yeah, that's perfect. Just what we'd expected. All right, now before we move on to aggregate functions, let's get rid of those duplicate rows we were having trouble with earlier. Remember our old group by clause? Sure, it has the same impact as a distinct if there are no aggregate functions. You want to trim our result to the truly unique results? Add the group by expression over our elements fields. All right, our next statement here actually includes an aggregate function in the XML elements. Structure's pretty straightforward. We added the XML ag function around our XML element function and then also included this optional order by clause. Did you notice the specification for how to handle nulls? Yeah, that's standard across all order by clauses too. I think we'll put our nulls first. Okay, one more quick select statement here and we've covered the XML creation side. Please check out this query. We're creating an XML processing statement and a comment. Again, not real hard to see here how this would be helpful. Let's go ahead and run this guy and verify that the results were what we expected. Oh man, even Toad can't handle that XML comment function. Better try a good old SQL Plus. Okay, finally, that's what we were after. All right, now that we know how to format our relational data into XML, let's turn the game around and read an external XML file into a relational table. Here's the syntax that we're going to need. First, we create another directory object to point to the location of our hard drives where we're actually storing our XML files. In our case, that location is C SQL XML files, and we'll call our directory object XML_file. Next, we need a table with a field of type XML type. We called our table XML shipping records. Yes, in our little XML example here, we're going to work with shipping records. Finally, I then went out and created an XML file called shippingrecords01092017.xml and stored it in my C SQL XML files directory. Should be able to insert a pointer to that guy via this B file constructor, right? Well, at least in theory. First off, if you get a permission error when you run that insert statement, it's probably because Oracle's util file package doesn't have access to that directory. Make certain you open that guy up to all non-administrative users. If it still doesn't work, it's probably a function of your init.aura specification. Here's the deal. When Oracle starts an instance, it reads the init.aura file to determine parameters specific to your instance. One of those parameters in that init.aura file needs to be util_file_dir equals star, or at least util_file_dir equals your file directory where Oracle can do file I/O. The standard is simply util_file_dir equals star, meaning it can use any space you tell it via the create directory command. Next possible issue is you use lowercase to specify the object name in the create directory command, and then lowercase with the bfile constructor. Bad news. For some unknown reason, Oracle chose to store that directory reference as an uppercase, but doesn't provide a similar upper on the string you provide for that reference. Net, you have to specify that directory object as an all uppercase string. Yeah, if that sounds like the voice of negative reinforcement, then you're probably correct. Finally, this insert statement will fail if your XML file is not properly formed. Yes, gang, Oracle is going to check for a well-formed XML file and throw it back at you if it's not. Okay, as you can tell, I was fortunately eventually got mine to work. Yes, I'd forgotten the all caps directory object thing, and it took me 2 different Google searches to figure out my mistake. Alright, once you think you have that bfile pointer established, we better try to follow it and read the contents of the external file. A simple select star from XML shipping records in SQL Plus with the output buffer to set something like 1,000 characters should get the job done. By the way, neither Toad or developer are going to even try to respond in a reasonable fashion to that query. Why did Oracle ever stop supporting the GUI-enabled version of SQL Plus anyway? Sometimes the only thing which actually works. Okay. Now it's time to start parsing that XML file, such that if we so chose, we could store this information back into a relational form and then use our standard SQL queries. We'll start out simple with this little query which extracts the customer ID and order ID tags from the shipping records. Shipping record hierarchy. Yes, by the way, only SQL Plus will play this game. Neither Toad or developer can handle this query. Also, this is really 2 rows with a customer ID, order ID tag pair in each row. Just looks goofy because SQL Plus is wrapping. I tried to use the set long, but it didn't seem to want to respond to that with these XML tags. Next, we select the entire shipping record tag hierarchy with the / notation. I think that's pretty sweet. Next, what if we only wanted the second shipping record in the tag hierarchy? Sure, Oracle gives us this very nice array indexing strategy. This should be second nature for any of you 3GL coders. Next, we check out a couple of simple existence checks using the record index strategy. Doesn't take much imagination to see how these constructs could be used to create a loop which went through each record individually, then decomposed it and stored the contents into a relational table. Very cool. Okay, only one more concept to handle. Those tag embedded attributes. Actually, the syntax is even a little intuitive here when you think about it with the @ sign. Again, just some new syntax to memorize. Nothing difficult.
All right, that was big fun. I enjoyed that. Like I said at the intro to this lecture, I think XML is one area of what is currently less frequently used construct that is starting to really take off and really explode. And again, please check out my full-blown course on Oracle XML later 2017. All right, let's do a quick review of what we learned. We started off by creating XML tags with their associated value via the simple XML element function. Real easy to use. We then got things a little more complex by nesting those guys. No real problem there. And then the next step, of course, was to add attributes embedded in the lead tag itself. XML attribute function, real easy to use. We then looked at the XML aggregate function, sort of self-explanatory, as were the XML PI or processing instructions and XML comment functions. Again, real straightforward and easy to use. Finally, we wrapped that lecture up taking a look at how to parse an XML file when that file was existing outside of our database via a B file pointer. Not really too much to it, quite frankly. Once you got the syntax down, it was all pretty straightforward. Hope you enjoyed. To that end, our next lecture is going to be on performance tuning. Not a real big deal anymore relative to what it used to be when hardware cost as much as it did, but now, it's typically easier just to throw hardware at it. But there still are some rules of thumb that I want to go over in our next lecture, so I'll see you there. In the interim, you go out and have some fun, but learn something new every day.